Folks, please welcome your guest moderator for tonight from Posteritati, Stan O.
Hey everybody, so I'm Stan from Posteritati. We're a vintage movie poster gallery just a few blocks from here down in Soho. And I brought with me tonight the original, two of Joe's posters, the original one sheet for West Side Story and the original one sheet for Manhattan. So I'd like to welcome back the director, Mark Cerulli, editor, Paul Rosen, and JOE CAROFF.
Very good, thank you.
Welcome. So first, there are very few docs on movie poster design out there, so thank you guys for making this film and finally giving Joe the recognition he deserves. Joe, we've handled so many of your posters at Posteritati. You're a living legend in our field, so it's an honor to be talking to you. So first, maybe each of you can talk a little bit about how the film came about. Mark, what drew you to movie poster design as a subject? How did you connect with Joe? Joe, what was your reaction to, Mark asking you to do a documentary? And Paul, if you have anything to add to that.
Well, my whole attraction to all this was James Bond. I'm a big James Bond collector and fan, and my dad worked in advertising in Manhattan. And one of his friends, who was a copywriter, he said, "Oh, if you're into James Bond, you got to talk to JOE CAROFF." So that's how we connected. I sought you out, and you still had your firm at the time. Mm-hmm. And we talked, and then kind of lost touch for a few years. Then we got back in contact, right?
That's right, exactly.
And I remember saying, "Joe, you've done so much work. We should do a documentary on you." And you remember what you said?
No, I don't.
Well, I'll have to think about it. And that's, just no ego about it. He just, your work speaks for itself, right?
Well, I always thought if I wasn't going to be an artist, I wanted to be an actor.
Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then I roped this poor guy in.
Yeah.
Mark and I have been working together for many years, and he said, he explained to me who Joe was and obviously the work that I was very familiar with that Joe had done. And so when he asked if I was interested in working on it, Mark can ask me anything and I'll say yes. But when it was this project, it was thrilling. So, of course, I jumped in and here it is. Thank you, Joe.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so Joe, we've actually been in contact before because back in 2008, Posteritati published a book called Art of the Modern Movie Poster. It was like a coffee table book, sort of a survey of post-war movie poster design. Mm-hmm. And so naturally we included your West Side Story poster, but we mistakenly attributed it to Saul Bass.
Naturally.
Yeah. So Saul Bass, by the way, he designed the Vertigo Spiral, the Anatomy of a Murder poster, and many other movie poster designs. But I believe we spoke on the phone, when the book came out, and you very gently corrected us that it was you that designed it and not Saul Bass. And you were extremely gracious about it, by the way. So that was the first time I think, I found out about you. A lot of your designs are mistakenly attributed, as being the work of Saul Bass, which makes sense in a way. You're both very much part of the sort of mid-century modern milieu. But did that ever bother you that, a lot of your work was attributed to Bass?
Well,
and
as smart as Paul Rand, who signed everything he did.
Right, and Saul Bass signed a lot of his work too.
That's true.
Right,
But I never
but
signed my own work.
right,
I always thought it as an assignment that had to be done, had to be produced, and it was over. There was the next one. And that was it.
right. Did you have any interaction with Saul Bass, or did you?
My reaction with Paul Bass is I admired his work, but I never knew him. I never met him.
Oh, I see. Okay. And I also, sorry again for not crediting you properly. It is corrected in the digital file, and if we do reprint the book, it will properly credit you. So I'd love to hear just generally about the kind of nuts and bolts of studio work in the 60s and 70s. You mentioned you had a pretty large staff, and some of your campaigns have been attributed to employees of yours like Bert Klieger and Lon Kirshner.
That's correct.
Can you talk a little bit about how you tackle assignments and how you delegated work?
With whom?
To your staff, like people like Bert Klieger and Lon Kirshner.
Yes. Well, we did a lot of movie work, and we got quite a large group of assignments. I think at one point we probably had 10 campaigns going at once. And the work had to be distributed with staff. So I would do general designing, doing quick sketch work for others to follow through on.
Yeah.
And that's how the work developed.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an issue with the mic?
Is this thing on? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe if you could just
I'll come a
kind of
little
direct
closer.
it to your.
Mhm.
So right after I finished watching the doc, I was dying to know what your comps for the Untouchables look like, because you really loved them. Do you keep much of an archive of your designs, and in particular, like designs that didn't actually make it through the process?
All my designs for the Untouchables were denied. They said simply, no, thank you.
But you didn't
I can
keep
answer
them.
that.
Okay.
Joe kept nothing. I mean, I even asked for a business card. Joe, do you have a business card from Caroff and Associates? No.
I do now.
So you mentioned that you had a direct, if minimal, working relationship with Woody Allen.
Yes.
I know there are some directors that have very specific ideas of how they want their poster to look. Did you often work directly with filmmakers when you were working on their campaigns? And were there particular filmmakers that were especially engaged in that process?
I'm not getting your question. You want to know?
Did you work directly with, like you mentioned working with Woody Allen, like you would actually have a meeting, and
Yes.
he wasn't very communicative, you said, but you would at
Working
least
with
like,
Woody Allen is more of a description than a fact. You hardly worked with Woody. You
right,
simply show him half a dozen treatments of the title treatment for him, and he would walk by and select one, and that was it. Never a word like nice guys or even good morning or whatever, nothing. There was no discussion with Woody.
right.
How about other filmmakers? Other filmmakers.
It's quite different, quite different. One would always get a good response.
Do you have any memorable experiences working with, like, did you work with Robert Wise at all on West Side Story, or Martin Scorsese on The Last Temptation of Christ?
Not really.
Okay.
I would just work in my studio, produce what had to be produced, and that was the end of it. I deliver the goods and stand back.
what was it like collaborating with other poster artists? Like, for example, Bob Peak did the artwork on Rollerball.
Bob
Right.
was a fantastic illustrator. I really respected his work. I had a great regard for it. And all I had to do on the illustrations that he would produce is simply do the logo work.
Oh, so would
Nothing more.
he generally create the artwork first and
Yes.
then okay?
And then I had to adapt accordingly.
And did you guys actually get in a room together and just kind of talk things
No,
out, or
I
just
never
sort of?
met him.
Oh, really? Wow.
That's right.
Wow. Okay.
He
Was
never met me.
and was it the same for the Clint Eastwood posters that you did? Because that was David Blossom. Is that the artist?
I don't think so.
No. Okay. So that's normally credited to David Blossom. Maybe that's also an error.
Yeah.
But okay, so the 007 logo. So I think I feel like the best design has a feeling of inevitability to it, and but it takes a really great designer to find that sort of inevitable design, and like the 007 logo and a lot of your work has this feeling of like inevitability. And you know, the 007 logo is one of the most instantly recognizable graphics in 20th century pop culture. It just seems like that they got it for $300 is just kind of insane to me. I read somewhere that they're considering adding your name to the end credits of the movies. Is that true? And what's the status of that?
That never worked.
It never worked. Okay.
No, on the 007 series, through the Eon people in Britain, I requested by letter, why not, along with the truck drivers getting credit and the electricians getting credit, how about a shot for me?
Yeah.
No. Never any response to the letter, by the way, either.
Yeah,
I
that's
met
messed
Barbara
up.
Broccoli some years later. We had a pleasant discussion with each other, but never talked about that for not a second.
Wow.
However, they did remember your birthday, your big birthday, right?
And I got to give them credit for that. On my 100th birthday, they sent me a beautiful watch. I'm wearing it now,
Oh wow.
and it's become a great friend. It's 5/16 of an inch thick on my wrist, and I enjoy it very much. I feel privileged. And on the back of the watch, they engraved to Joe with an 007 engraved in it as well. Very,
That's
very
nice.
nice present.
Yeah, that is nice. So the Museum of Moving Image here in town, they're doing an exhibition on Dan Perry. The title, the sort of, he's known for his title sequences for movies like Taxi Driver and Star Wars. And I feel like your poster design for West Side Story would have been a great starting point for an amazing title sequence. But they ended up, I think, using Saul Bass for that. Can you tell us about some of the title sequences that you actually worked on?
Well, I worked on A Fistful of Dollars and A Few Dollars More, and that's that series for Clint Eastwood.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there were not otherwise comparatively few title treatments that I did for film, actually.
Okay, is that because you just kind of didn't have much of an interest in that kind of work, or?
I never looked for it. I never tried to do more of that kind of work. But I did enjoy very much doing the title treatments for Death of a Salesman,
Oh, okay. Right.
because for the first time, I think, on a movie screen, instead of typography, it was handwritten.
Oh.
And handwritten in such a way, because of the emotional content of The Death of a Salesman, the ink was running out. And if you look at the logo carefully, you'll see that in part of the script, the ink has stopped running. And you get a little bit of trailer, but that's all.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So this next question is from a friend of mine who designs movie posters now. And he told me he often faces resistance from his clients when his designs don't feature the faces of the stars of the movie. And I noticed, the West Side Story poster does not picture Natalie Wood. The Manhattan poster behind me, it's just, the stars are kind of in silhouette, they're barely shown. Did you face pressure from studios to have the faces of movie stars on your posters?
I'm not quite following your question.
So a lot of posters nowadays have, like, it's basically they're barely designed. Oh, thank you. They're barely designed. It's just a giant head, of the star of the movie. And so this friend of mine who designs posters now, he's just constantly being told by his clients that they want to see the star, the face of the star on the poster.
Oh, sure.
Did you face similar pressure from clients?
I understand your question. The answer is no.
Wow, that's crazy. So actually, this question is for all three of you. Like, are there like, do you, when you walk by a movie theater, do you kind of pay special attention to posters and kind of remark, whether they're good or not to yourself? And
I respond
oh,
all
cool.
the time.
And have you seen a campaign recently that you thought was really strong, or any of you other?
Not especially. The other thing that does drive me crazy is lousy spacing.
Right.
You can't stand it. My lettering teacher years ago made it very clear to me that the spaces between letters is critical, but the spaces within the letters in themselves is equally critical. It was a great lesson to me. Gave me a tremendous perspective. Taught me a lot.
So how's the letter spacing on the Film Forum logo?
I'll send you a letter.
All right, great. All right, so Spencer, if you want to, maybe pass the mic around if there are any questions in the audience.
Hello.
Oh, okay.
Hi. In addition to the main logos and the title treatments, did you also design the entire layouts of these posters?
I cannot hear you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Did you design the entire layout of these posters?
Where everything goes?
Oh, yes.
You did?
Yes.
Okay, great. And my last question was, to clear up the Saul Bass controversy, have you thought of putting out your own coffee table book with all of your stuff in it?
Yes.
Is that coming out soon?
Mm-hmm.
I want to see it.
Have you thought to create a book with your work only in it?
Yes, I have. I've made a couple of self-promotion pieces. Mm-hmm.
But in terms of a coffee table book that can be actually, put in bookstores and with your name on the front with all of your work in it?
Yes, I do. Well, not all of my work, no. That would have to be a pretty big book.
Go for it.
I've done a couple of self-promotion pieces over the years. And I used to have a title treatment for all of that. What was it now? It was called Works and Words, or Words and Works. That was it. And the ampersand between the two words functioned for the O in both words at the bottom. Did I make that clear? I don't think so. You can picture the words work and words, and the ampersand is in between the two lines. But the design of the ampersand is such that it functions for an O at the top and at the bottom. I think that's clear. Yes, any questions about that? Forget it.
Joe, back in 1967, when I was a kid, every time I'd go through Times Square, that gigantic billboard for You Only Live Twice was staring at me. It was so exciting. I couldn't wait to see the film. I couldn't wait till it came to Jersey City, right across the river where I lived. So my father took me to the Astor Theater so I could see it in New York. That was the biggest billboard, I think, even today, that was ever put up for a motion picture. Did you have anything to do with putting that up, or how did you feel when you saw it in Times Square?
Overwhelmed. Yeah, I did it. Wow, was response, of course. But that was the first time that happened.
So that wasn't your decision to put it up there. Was it your suggestion, or you just happened to see it?
I had nothing to do with it.
It was David Picker, I guess, put it up. David Picker's idea was to put it up there. So you were as surprised as anybody when you saw it.
Absolutely.
Stands the test of time.
And we had, in the documentary, we had to trim it out, but Joe designed the type fonts for Thunderball, From Russia with Love, You Only Live Twice, and Diamonds Are Forever. Remember, you said you weren't crazy about the Diamonds Are Forever.
That's right.
Although I loved it. I loved it. Why didn't you like it?
I don't know. Those things happen. Yeah. Well, I've always enjoyed lettering, and I always liked putting emotion into the lettering. I think that's the thing that kept me interested in it. If I could get an emotional tang into the lettering and make it work so that it breathed a little, rather than just having you understand what the word is as a word, but you also get a little schmaltz from it, a little more dig, a little more excitement from the lettering itself.
Is that a design word, schmaltz?
It's an old Jewish term, but it means guts.
Did you have a question, ma'am?
Yes. Okay, thank you. I also have an art background, but my question was when you did design a font for each project, did you do the whole alphabet and just keep it in your records so that you could use them again?
I find that a very interesting, good question.
Thank you.
I compliment you on the question. It's a good question. The answer is no. I have in fact invented a couple of alphabets, depending on what the particular treatment was for. And I've never made a thing of it. In other words, produced a book to show the faces or any. But I have notes and photostats in my studio to remind me, because some of the faces I designed would work for a variety of applications. Yeah.
Hi, Joe. Hi. Thanks for doing this, and I'd like to thank Mark and Paul for this great documentary. We saw it on television, but to see it again the screen's a little bigger than my house, but it's just amazing. And I'm from Elizabeth and Linden, so I have to talk to you about that later. I think we may have something in common. But my question is, did you have timetables to do this work, or were you rushed, or did you take your time? Like for West Side Story, was your first poster, I imagine, right? That's the first?
Well, I did other posters.
Yeah, right.
Some never achieved.
Right. So how long, my question basically is, how long would you say a project would take? Did it vary, or normally whatever, a few weeks or whatever?
That's a good question. And it would be very, very different. It would depend. Sometime I would really have to slave over the concept and, reaching, trying to make it work. And often I would just stop after a while and quit, go take a walk in the park,
Like right
have a cup of coffee,
right.
something, and come back again.
Right.
I found that if the treatment doesn't pop up pretty quickly, then it's not going to. Standing and slaving over it does not work.
Right.
So that's when I absolutely get away from my desk, walk into the living room, smell the flowers, and come on back later. But I have found that intuitively, when I'm looking for the solution, I recognize it when it's there. I don't always reach it right away. But then it says to me, this is the one, or this is it. And then I develop it more graphically, refining the design and so on. But the concept has to be there.
Great, thank you.
I was curious about the Manhattan poster, how the idea for the silhouetted photo by the bridge came to be.
I'm not hearing your question.
The silhouettes by the bridge.
The Manhattan poster, the rest of the, I know you did the logo, but I was curious about the
Okay,
rest of
I
the
will tell
poster
you,
design.
That photo was selected from, I don't know, several dozen photos. And that seemed to me to express it far better than any of the others. And that's how we picked up on it.
So you selected the photo and
Yes.
the placement of it on this style.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, I like the flagpole, the post, and the couple together facing away. It was excellent black and white flavor that I felt best also reflected Manhattan. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
I was curious about if there was some resolution with your father. I think
Well, if you may ask,
Oh, yeah. I was curious if there was some resolution with your father because I think the documentary hinted at it, but could you talk a little bit more about that?
Did you get that?
Yes, was there a resolution with your father? Did you come to terms with him? Did he come to terms with you?
What an interesting question. Very personal. My father and I had a very difficult time. As a kid, I grew up wondering, what did I do wrong that Pop just doesn't seem to love me? It was very difficult. And also, my father was not interested in the things that I would do. Oftentimes, I would show him something, and his comment was usually a kind of a perfunctory, that's nice, and so on. Well, I was going to Arts High School in Newark, New Jersey, and lived with my sister Lillian so I wouldn't have to pay tuition because I lived in Linden, New Jersey. So going to art school in the city, and there I forgot the point I wanted to make. Oh yes, with my father. And we were learning how to paint things with a modern touch, so that if you painted an apple, you didn't paint it as if it were a photograph. You made it maybe a little boxy, a little rectangular, cut some planes in it, changed the color, did various kinds of things. Well, I did one like that. Oil paint on a cardboard. I was delighted with it. Brought it home and showed it to my father. My father took one look at it. You have to understand, this is a modernistic touch now. He looked at it and he said, "Is this the way you paint an apple?" I said, "Well, Pop, I know it's not natural looking. I could paint a natural apple, but this is looking into new treatments, trying to discover other ways to say the same thing and so on." Well, I went on, I would say, for a good half hour trying to make my father understand, and it was not working. My father wouldn't accept it. He had no room for anything else. I have to point out my father also painted. It was, what do I call it? Old school painting perhaps is a better expression for it, I'm not sure. But of course he was very upset. And no matter how much I tried to explain to him, it was not working. And because it was not working, I tried harder. And at the end of an hour, I think, I wound up just crying. I couldn't make him understand. And I don't know what it was in me that wouldn't give up. The hell with it. If he doesn't want it, okay. Couldn't do it. I could not do it. So I just stopped. I felt it was his loss. My father was a very hard-working house painter. He formed a corporation with another man, and they had a huge painting corporation. I remember once going with my father in his truck with his team of guys. They were painting concrete barges for the Navy. And it was in Baltimore. I accompanied him on that particular job. It was interesting, but I also got to learn how hard my father worked, really. He was leaving the house at 5:30 every morning with his panel truck loaded with ladders on each side. He told me one story that was really, in a way, kind of a horror story. They had an assignment to paint the interior of a huge water tank. And he was on a suspended scaffolding, working on that. And at 12 o'clock, the steam whistle automatically went off. My father nearly flew off that seat, ready to fly down the whole thing. Very, very disruptive. He relates that to me with a laugh, but it frightened the hell out of him.
It's a beautiful documentary.
Yes. My father, by the way, taught in a boys' vocational school. In those days, they had those vocational schools. They taught masonry, carpentry, and painting. And young men, average age 20-odd, were all learning trades. They're learning how to be in a vocational school, learning to be somebody, to earn a living. So my father taught the painting classes. And I always felt so proud when we pulled into the parking lot. There was a spot labeled J. Caroff. My father's name was Julius, so it was J. Caroff. And we'd pull in and park in his spot. I always felt proud about that. And my father was much loved by his students. They all worked on 20 by 30-inch cardboard panels, beaverboard panels, actually, learning how to paint. My father taught them stenciling, wood graining, and some effect, I never knew the name for it, but as you walked by it, it breathed. I don't know how else to explain it. It changed as you walked by it. He never told me the secret of how he did that. I don't think anyone ever knew how he did that. Remains a mystery.
All right, I'm afraid we have another screening coming in,
Okay.
but I wanted to thank you so much,
Not at all.
Joe,
I enjoyed it.
and Mark and Paul, and thank you guys for coming.